That sting works. Thank you, Katie. Welcome. Welcome to our annual scientific meeting. You're also welcome. I'm almost sorry to stop you all talking and listening to the buzz because it's great to hear everybody chatting. I'm Ashley Adamson. I'm the Director of the School for Public Health Research, and it's absolutely fantastic to be here in Bristol. Those of you with a long memory will remember we were meant to be here in March 2020. There were other plans and other things going on in March 2020, and we ended up, obviously cancelled. So 5 years later, here we are in Bristol, and it's a beautiful place to be. So I hope while you're here, you get some chance to enjoy Bristol. Okay, so I've got a few slides, a bit of housekeeping and a bit of welcome, and then to tell you a little bit about what's going to happen over the next couple of days. So first of all, I just want to draw your attention to this. You'll be pleased to hear I'm not going to go through every number on this slide, but this will be on a reel, which I'll tell you about in just a minute. But this is our NIHR School for Public Health Research in numbers. And there's a couple of things I think I'd like to draw your attention to. So far this year, and we're just in May, we have had 24,264 YouTube video views from our website. Now that's phenomenal. We've got some amazing material on our website, and it's clearly been appreciated and viewed. So I think that's fantastic. We've got, obviously, as well as the school, we've got a relationship with the other two schools and the funding that we have, that we're working on the prevention programme, but also with social care, dementia, and primary care on mental health. So the three-school work is new and really exciting. The other thing I'd just like to draw attention to is the Blue Sky and LinkedIn followers. So we're trying to get those numbers up. We're using Blue Sky and LinkedIn. The link is on some of the slides. We have more than 5,000 followers on Twitter, but for obvious reasons, we're trying to change. So the numbers, we want to get them up again and get everybody from Twitter across. So over the next 2 days, you'll have in the breaks a reel going of celebrating our success. So please do look out for that. And on that will also be that slide with all of those numbers. And if you've got anything, when you see that reel, you think, they haven't included me. That's because you haven't told us. So please come and tell us, and we can edit in real time and get you up on the reel. Okay. You have got the programme for today and tomorrow, and if you haven't noticed already, it's on the back of your lanyard. Okay, so the programme for today and tomorrow is on your lanyard. Very shortly, we're going to kick off with some lightning talks from some of our trainees, their PhD students. We had yesterday a fantastic day at the M-Shed for the ResNet Day, and it's great to have a lot of the ResNet members who were there yesterday back with us today. That meeting was organised by the ResNet committee, and it was fantastic. And we had Jim McManus, who's at the back there, who gave a keynote at that, and it's great to have Jim with us again today. So that's today, and then tomorrow, and again, it's on the back of your lanyard, and if you scan this code, you'll get the full programme for the day. So both of those, you'll get the full details in the programme, along with the biogs of the speakers and the details. So do scan that. Housekeeping. Oh. Went too far. So just on the housekeeping, obviously we're in this room for the main event. Fire exits are at the back there. Please don't go out there, it's a balcony. So fire exits out that way. We've got 2 places for refreshments, so one just out here and then one in the other room, and that's where lunch will be served as well, and all of the refreshments. So there's 2 places. There's 2 places for that. The other things to say is that we have the SPHR stand, and beside that there is a feedback wall. More on that in a minute. And then we also have our PAN, our public network, have a stand here, and we also have our colleagues from the Research Support Service, the Specialist Centre for Public Health, so please do go and talk to them, and we've got Louise Hayes and Sarah Sowden here for that, so please go and talk to them. I think, there is posters as well in those 2 rooms, and in the poster sessions, people will be presenting on those posters. So do go and give them their support when they're presenting. There isn't a fire alarm planned, so if there is an alarm goes off, it's the real thing. So please do make your way out there, and then there'll be people directing you out there. Look, if you're looking for toilets and you haven't found them already, there's some out there to the right-hand side, but there's also some downstairs. There's some further toilets there if they're busy. Okay, so I'm sure you're all aware of this, but May is National Walking Week. Month. And the campaign asks everybody to walk 20 minutes every day. So we've got a series of guided walks for you. There'll be a lunchtime walk today, meet at reception at 1 o'clock. And there will be lunch, okay? So if you go for the walk, I've been given absolute assurance, you go for your walk first, when you get back, there will be more lunch. The hotel will be, so the people not on the walk won't eat all your lunch. So there will be lunch if you would like to go for a walk, and the same, tomorrow there's a walk or a run. Not both. Meet at hotel reception at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, and we'll have a lunchtime walk tomorrow too. The other is that, as previous years, we're aiming to have as sustainable as possible ASM, which is why you don't have a printed programme, and you've got the code there to scan. We have been working very closely with our amazing colleagues at Beacon House to support this, and you'll have been asked to record how you travelled here so that we can actually look at that carbon footprint of the meeting. All of our food will be plant or vegetarian based, and we've done very minimal printing. The hotel is beautiful. It's an old building, but they are working towards this and have a Green Key award. I think last year when we were in Birmingham, we had a very modern building with obviously the older building brings grandeur but challenges as well. A few other things. So those of you who have been to ASMs previously know we have a tradition that if you are able, when we clap, we ask you to stand. And that means that just occasionally you get up and you move and you have a little bit of, you can do a bit of a dance as well if you like when you're clapping, but at least stand to clap, and then we're doing a little bit of movement. Questions, we'll have a number of Q&A sessions, and we will be taking questions from the floor, but we've also got Slido. And on the next slide, I'll just put that up in a minute, is the code to scan for Slido. And you can upvote those questions that are coming up on Slido if you've got it that downloaded. And we'll have questions from the floor, but also from Slido. So you can put your questions up there if you're feeling that you want to plan ahead and get those questions in. We've got 2 additional spaces, and they are labelled, they're out the door and around the corner. There's a quiet space, the Windsor room. That's the one without the table. And that's a quiet space, so please don't go in there to do meetings. If you've got meetings you have to go into, please keep that as a quiet space. The Hanover room is where you go to do your meetings if you need to, I'm hoping that that's not going to be everybody, and it's very minimal, but there's space there for you, and that's the Hanover room, and that's got the table. So if you walk into a room and it doesn't have a table, no meetings, please. And then we've got an evening event for many of you who have registered for that, and Rona will tell you more about that later on in terms of being hosted by the University of Bristol. It's at St George's, and we'll explain where that is, but it's a very short walk. So I'm just going to go on to that so you can scan this for the Slido I'll leave that up. And while I do, I just wanted to also take an opportunity to welcome Rona Campbell and Penime Adab and GJ Melendez-Torres, who are deputy directors of the school and will be on the stage during the next 2 days, chairing different events, different parts of that, and Rona will be on to do the Q&A after the next session. So I think all of them are familiar to you, and they'll introduce themselves. But I just wanted to thank Rona, Penime and GJ, and also for doing the chairing during the meeting. Are we all finished scanning? There is Wi-Fi. So for Wi-Fi, I should have said that was on one of the other slides. If you just go into your settings and look for Wi-Fi, you should find the hotel, and you just click on that, and you don't have to register, you just have to click to get their terms and conditions. And the Wi-Fi, we've been using it the last couple of days, and it's worked pretty well.
Just to say, it's the one that says guest is the one that's the free one, just to get on without a code.
Yeah. So yeah, Bonvoy guest. Yeah? Okay. Katie, I feel like I've got a little bit of an echo. I don't know whether is it just me? Is it all fine? Great. I just wanted to check before we actually get into the interesting content of the day. Right. So the next thing is just a few things about the conference. I don't think I need to say this really. Take time to interact with others. I think you were all doing that and we stopped you. So please do that. I know we all have work colleagues here, and we don't always see our work colleagues from our own institutions, but do take time to meet others, and particularly to meet some of our trainees, and when they're giving their posters and giving presentations, talk to them afterwards. It's a fantastic opportunity for people to network. So yeah, the posters, our stands I've already mentioned are all out there. So do again take time to visit those. Join the conversation both with our Blue Sky and LinkedIn, and they're on there, and they're also on many of the slides. And I said a little bit more about the SPHR stand and feedback. So it's really important that we get feedback from the meeting because it helps us plan the next year. And often, you get back to your day jobs and it's all very busy, and you may be surprised that we don't get 100% feedback. I know that's shocking, isn't it? Shocking. But what we've got this time is a feedback wall. So they're behind the SPHR stand, and they'll direct you with post-its right through the 2 days. Please, any feedback to say, we really enjoyed that presentation, or we didn't like this, we'd rather do this, we really like this, keep doing that, whatever. Put it up on there, and if you put some feedback up on that wall, so exciting, you get a keep cup. So again, contributing to our sustainability, you can use that for the next couple of days for drinks and take it away with you. So there is an SPHR School for Public Health Research keep cup that you get, but you only get it when you've given some feedback. All right. So this year, again, we'll get 100% feedback, just like last year. Okay. I think I'm pretty much done. Finally, and I want to just offer our thanks to the University of Bristol for hosting the meeting. These things don't just happen. The director put in a huge amount of work. Our colleagues in Bristol have put a lot of work in, and I know that Russ Jago was at the desk there welcoming you all, so thank you for that, Russ. Rona and Russ have done a lot of work on this, along with the rest of the ASM Planning Committee that's been chaired by Rona and Matt Egan, who, hello Matt, is here, along with, we've had resident members and others on that panel. So if you've been involved in the organisation of the conference, we'll take opportunity to thank you later, but I just want to right up front say thank you. And also for the hosting us this evening at the reception, and Rona will tell you more about that later. Okay, so that remains for me to say, please enjoy the conference, take maximum opportunity, having travelled to Bristol to enjoy the rest of today and tomorrow. And I'm being told time's up and I'm finished. So what I'm going to do now is to ask our speakers for the lightning talks. We've got all PhD students. I'm not going to go through their names, they're all on here. And they'll introduce themselves, and they're going to come up onto stage one at a time and give a lightning talk, 3 minutes. Can I ask you please to wait until the end of the final speaker, so after Amy has spoken, to express your thanks. So if we just forgive us, everybody will make sure that that's a really good thanks. But if we could just restrain ourselves from clapping in between so that we go straight from one to another. And then we will have a Q&A at the end when everybody will come up and Rona will be on stage to chair the Q&A. Okay, I will go on to that first slide. And thank you, everybody. Have a great couple of days.
Good morning. I'm Susannah Tooze. People are dying too young and spending too much of their lives in ill health because of preventable, non-communicable disease. The commercial determinants of health, which are the systems, practices and pathways by which commercial actors drive health and equity, contribute towards between 41% and 78% of these deaths. My PhD aims to critically analyse the policy processes and policy outcomes of the most recent Conservative government food strategy, with a particular emphasis on exploring the strategies and mechanisms by which commercial actors influence decision-making. And part of my project will involve primary data collection using semi-structured interviews with key policy actors. Many of these interviews will be elite interviews, and elite actors are those with a powerful position in powerful private or public organisations, which give them responsibility for or influence over public policy. And elite interviewing highlights the potential power asymmetry and the relative privilege which favours the interviewee over the interviewer. Now, much of the literature presents elite actors as interview participants that are a very static category with a particular set of problems that the researcher needs to overcome. For example, them using their relative power to dominate the interview or sticking to particular talking tracks in order to manage their reputations. And as a novice interviewer, this has left me feeling massively intimidated and very unprepared to be able to navigate these challenges. So, this has prompted me to reflexively explore not just my own positionality and identity when approaching these interviews, but also that of the participants that I will be interviewing. There is a body of literature that discusses the shifting positionality and identity of both researcher and participant throughout the course of the interview. with each adopting multiple identities in relation to different aspects of the subject matter. And focusing on the subject matter rather than the elite actor as the focus of inquiry opens up the possibility for co-construction of knowledge rather than me just approaching the interview as a deferential and powerless researcher. Similarly, I've been operating under the assumption that I would play an outsider role in the interviews. But there is literature that discusses the fluidity of this, and whilst an outsider in terms of policy process, I could be seen as an insider in relation to some of the subject matter based on my role as a researcher and my relative privilege in other areas of my life. I've only just started to scratch the surface, and this is very much a work in progress, so please do come and talk to me if you have any experience to share, and I'd love to tell you in more detail what I've been learning about. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, my name is Ciara Thomas, and I'm going to be, well, that's not my slide, but I'm going to be giving a quick glimpse into some of the work that I've been doing for my PhD on the mental health of girls and young women. We all know what a formative and tumultuous time adolescence can be. Young people are balancing biological, psychological, social changes, puberty, school stress, interpersonal relationships, and the social comparison that comes with TikTok and Instagram. Navigating all of this is very difficult, and it creates a vulnerability for mental health problems. And indeed, 1 in 7 adolescents experience a mental health problem. 75% of mental health problems are established by the age of 24. And central to my PhD is the finding that girls and young women are experiencing twice the rate of mental health problems, such as anxiety and depression, compared to boys and young men. So, out of all the work I've done so far for my PhD, I would like to talk about the qualitative study that I'm working on. Thanks. So my qualitative study is on the views of girls and young women aged 16 to 19 about why there are high levels of anxiety in their age and gender group. I've completed the first batch of interviews, and I'm in the very early stages of reflexive thematic analysis. So I just wanted to go through some of the very, very initial codes that I've developed and that have stood out for me. So first of all, the most frequently discussed contributor of anxiety in girls is feeling the pressure to be pretty, attractive, and thin, follow beauty trends, and to be healthy. And many girls said that social media is a main driver of this. Girls also spoke about overhearing sexist language from boys at school and their behaviours, which indicated how they perceive women. A few girls mentioned Andrew Tate and attributed lots of this language and behaviour to incel culture on TikTok and just any content that encourages misogyny and sexualised and shamed women at the same time. Speaking of other toxic environments, girls also spoke about feeling judged by other girls for their appearance, talked about bullying from other girls, how it made it harder for them to make friends. And peer relationship conflict was a strong contributor for anxiety in girls. And lastly, girls also spoke about feeling overwhelmed at school, but also college's lessened anxiety because they felt like it was less cliquey than school, and they felt like they could finally be themselves. So, yes, as I said, I'm very, in the early stages of this analysis, but I've got some interviews next week as well, so I'm looking forward to seeing where this will go, and yeah, that's everything.
Hi everyone, I'm Helen Little. If I asked you to think of the biggest challenge in qualitative research, you would probably say recruitment. And this has been the case in my study, but not in the way I expected. Instead, I've had imposter participants, a phrase coined in the qualitative literature to describe someone impersonating a falsified character that does not align with their true lived experience. Crucially, this is not misunderstanding the inclusion criteria, but misrepresentation. And this is an increasing issue in online qualitative research, so I hope today sharing my experience is helpful. So we had 112 participants sign up and register their interest, and of these we invited a diverse subsample to participate, and we've successfully interviewed and included 27 participants at time point 1. We have so far identified 32 of the original 112 to be imposters, and identified these through several key methods, and on their own, each can have other possible explanations, and it's important to enter interviews with a degree of trust as you want participants to feel valued. However, putting several of these red flags together helps to kind of bring a bigger picture and understand when this might be happening in a study. So firstly, a pattern began to emerge in the way in which some participants were emailing their note of interest. This seemed very AI or textbook written, using similar language to each other or quoting direct excerpts from the study advert. Secondly, in the demographic survey, putting non-existent postcodes, I had 4 participants living at Buckingham Palace, and I had others with mobile numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then at interview, I identified several who were unable to recite simple information from their demographic survey, providing new postcodes, mobile numbers, or using scripts to answer simple questions, such as, could you tell me a little bit about your baby? And finally, at the time of writing up and reviewing the transcript, I noticed that a couple of participants had provided very thin or vague descriptions with gaps in their narrative, or saying my experience, but there was never any detail about what that experience was. So to summarise what I have learned, firstly, I think it's crucial to consider the type of financial remuneration, and I did offer quite a high financial incentive to try and facilitate recruitment, which was feedback I'd had from PPI, but I think that also increased other motivations to participate. And we used social media as an additional method, but then I did lose control over who had access to this link. And personally, I just want to say that at the end of the day, I think this has probably been the biggest challenge I've faced so far in my PhD, but I have learned how to problem solve, and the positive feedback I've received from parents telling me how much they valued the work has really helped me to keep going. And if you'd like to discuss how I've dealt with this, or you've had any similar experiences, please do find me afterwards. I'd love to talk more. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Libby Haynes, and I'm going to give you an overview of some preliminary results for my quantitative investigation into associations between working while still at school and the health and well-being of 17 to 18-year-olds in the UK. For this, I used data from the DeBeat study with over 1,000 participants who were 17 to 18 and still in compulsory education. Around half reported that they were engaged in paid employment. I looked at 3 outcomes: their well-being score, their self-reported average sleep duration, and their dietary quality based on scoring their reported food intake against the DASH diet guidelines. I ran multiple regressions to see if there were any associations between these outcomes and working or not working, and for those who were working, I also checked to see if there were any associations with the number of hours they were working per week. I added interaction terms to these models to see if any associations differed based on the socioeconomic status of the participants. Potential confounders were included as covariates. The main headline result is that I didn't find any significant associations between working or not working or work hours on sleep duration, well-being, or dietary quality. A few potential interactions with socioeconomic status cropped up, which I'm still looking into, but the effect sizes, if any, are small. Hopefully these results can reassure any anxious parents worried about how employment might affect their teenagers. That concludes the basic story of my analysis, but while this is the story I planned to write, a second narrative appeared during this project, one which demanded attention. I had planned my analysis based on the assumption that teenagers from lower socioeconomic backgrounds would be more likely to be engaged in paid employment simply out of necessity. However, when I produced the basic descriptive statistics, I noticed that I had it backwards. The young adults in this sample are more likely to report that they are in paid employment if they have a higher socioeconomic and less minoritised background. Specifically, employed participants are less likely to have been eligible for 3 school meals, more likely to be white, and more likely to be from less deprived areas according to the index of multiple deprivation. 10 here represents the least deprived areas. I have some ideas about why this might be, but please come and find me and tell me your insights as well later on. We know that being employed has well-established associations with health, and having previous work experience can make it easier to get more work. I think this is yet another example of how early inequality starts and how it is perpetuated with implications for health inequity throughout the life course. This was not the point of my analysis, but I think it's worth investigating in the future as a potential inroad to reducing health inequity.
Hi, good morning everyone. I'm Leah Atwell. I'm going to be talking today about my PhD and the critical role of public involvement in my project. So to give some context, I began this work with a recognition that community-based parenting support services, like children's centres, can be vital to tackling early years health inequalities. However, many families, particularly those with increased needs, aren't accessing them. So there's been an increased recognition of the benefit of involving parents in service design, but involving parents meaningfully can be hard. What I've noticed is that many services are stuck in this kind of fix that fails loop. Teams are investing precious time and resource in trying to engage parents, but many are struggling to either reach the right families in the first place, or they feel completely unable to act on what they hear. Systems can feel inflexible, communities then feel let down, and trust breaks down, and so the cycle continues. And yet there are many pockets of success. So I'm seeking to understand what makes the difference, what facilitates community involvement to lead to meaningful change, especially which benefits those we continually deem hard to reach. So it's not only been important to practice what I'm preaching, to involve stakeholders about involvement, but this has also been a really integral part of my project's success. So first, understanding and conceptualizing this problem in the first place took some work. I'm lucky that I've got two really fantastic civil service practice advisors who've helped me align the project with national priorities. I also spoke with many parents and practitioners who shared their challenges and their hopes for the sector. And these early insights really highlighted the need for a realist approach, which can produce practical but complexity-sensitive learning about facilitative processes. So because community involvement isn't a discrete thing, it's messy, it's undefined, it's without a very explicit logic, I spent months talking to parents and practitioners to build a more coherent idea of what involvement is exactly, what we're trying to achieve exactly when we do it, and what do we think enables us to do it well. I finished this phase with a collaborative workshop with stakeholders who've now become my expert advisory group for the remainder of the project. And this event was full of really honest and passionate discussions that's really driven me onwards. So right now, I'm testing these theories against a diverse evidence base that my expert advisory groups helped me to identify. They'll also kind of act as sense checkers during the analysis, so challenging my thinking, pointing out the blind spots, in a very collaborative but rigorous process. And soon I'll be developing my understanding through 2 case study evaluations. Again, I was able to consult my practice advisors to identify a selection of local examples of great practice, where I can really delve into the details of the magic that makes involvement work. The outputs of all of this will be used to co-produce recommendations for practice and policy with my expert group. And this keen and regular integration of stakeholder knowledge will make these recommendations more grounded, more applicable, and more attainable for a range of parenting services by providing specific insights into opportunities for action. So together, we hope to make a real difference for services navigating this work and the communities that they serve. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Amy Turner, and my PhD focuses on food and nutrition in UK early years settings with the aim to inform early years policy development. So the first project I've undertaken as part of my PhD is a scoping review that aimed to assess the food policy, practice and provision in UK early years settings. So one of the most important findings from this review was the shocking lack of research in settings based in Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland. as we found most of the studies were based in nurseries in England, and this really highlights a wide gap in our current knowledge, which should be addressed with further research. We also found that many of the private nurseries felt that they received less support and had less access to the policy development guidance than local authority-funded nurseries. And this really highlights the need for more governmental support and more accessible guidance available across all early years settings. So we also identified several barriers to healthy feeding practices, so including a lack of staff nutrition training, lack of time, limited staff, and budgetary constraints. And again, this really highlights the need for increased funding and increased government support in this sector, as well as more training opportunities for staff to really increase that level of nutrition knowledge. So in terms of provision, we found that a lot of the portion sizes provided in these settings were more appropriate for primary school aged children. However, there really was limited findings actually related to the nutritional quality of food provided in earlier settings, something that we should address with further research. So overall, this was a really important study because it drew together all that research on the early years food context in the UK, which hasn't been done before. And not only is this important for my research going forwards, it's also going to act as a really useful knowledge base for policymakers in the UK moving forwards into policy development. So the next steps for me include disseminating these findings to public health stakeholders, early years practitioners and policymakers. And then I'm also in the process of developing a nutritional analysis study using data from the NAPSAT UK trial, where I will aim to determine the nutritional quality of lunchbox foods compared to food provided within these nurseries. And then also address this relationship between cost of food, nutritional analysis and deprivation, something that is really important to address. I'm also, alongside this, developing a qualitative study involving early years practitioners, where we'll explore how nutritional guidance can be implemented effectively within this context. Thank you for listening. I appreciate any questions. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Rona Campbell. I am the Deputy Director with special responsibility for capacity building within the School of Public Health Research, and I'm also the Bristol lead for the SPHR. And in that context, I'd also really like to very much warmly welcome you to the lovely city of Bristol. I'd also like to thank our wonderful speakers and invite you to ask any questions of them that you have. And I think we've already got a couple of questions on Slido, but if there's any immediate questions in the room, otherwise we'll take the Slido ones.
So the first question was for...
So the first question was for Helen from Judy Kidger. How did you handle imposter participants if you only realised this during the interview?
Yeah, so I'll admit I was very anxious about that. But I think at the end of the day, the best thing was to keep calm, to try not escalate it any further. And I was advised by my ethics committee that giving the least amount of information possible while still being respectful was the best thing to do. So I just said that they no longer matched the eligibility criteria and thanked them for their time and left it at that. But if I didn't notice till the end of the interview, I then still had to financially provide the remuneration, but then I'd email them afterwards and say that I'm not taking them on to the next time point due to the eligibility criteria.
Great, thank you. And then the second question for Libby. Do you have plans to examine why you found the association between higher SES and being in work?
I very much want to, but it's also a little bit out of scope of my PhD. So it depends on whether or not I can fit that in, to be honest. I think it'd be really interesting. I'm also, in terms of my future projects, potentially looking at the next wave of the debate data and then having a look at how being employed in that first wave might affect their outcomes in the second wave. And that might also be informative for working out how this might be linked with inequities if actually I find that in that first wave, being employed gives them benefits later on.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the floor? Yes, Peter.
Hi, good morning. I'd like to ask Leah, if I may. Can I ask where your research question came from, whether it came from the parents who want to be involved? And can you give me a sort of case study or an example of the inflexibility that you talked about? And I do love your emphasis on public involvement.
Thank you very much. So the question came from talking both to parents and practitioners. So parents who'd been involved but felt that their involvement was tokenistic or noticed themselves in flexibilities in the services that the practitioners really wanted to help them, but were often constrained by the boundaries or the remit of what the service was trying to provide or funding, etc., that they had available. And from the practitioners who are really passionate about doing this and doing this well, but are fighting against lots of different barriers. In terms of a case study, I from someone else down the line heard of the one that really stuck with me in the early phase and really kind of made this question come about was of a service up north who'd put so much time and resource in engaging with their local traveller community, a community that they knew they weren't serving and that they knew that there was a lack of trust between them and the service. And they built really great relationships with them, but the kinds of things they were asking for were just... Communities tend to ask for more holistic support, for example, which services feel like they can't really provide. And that can be from just needing more partnership or just more funding, etc. And so, yeah, that really pushed the need for the question. Did that answer your question? It did. Thank you for the question.
I think we've got another one from the floor. Yes.
Hiya. My question is for Helen, and yeah, we've come across the imposter syndrome in one of our projects that we have done recently, and I was just wondering if you were starting your study again, or you were given any advice to anybody else who was going to do some qualitative online research, what you would advise them to do, or if there's anything you could put in place to try and identify them earlier.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it really wasn't something that we were anticipating coming across, so then I was thrown back from that, and then we had to deal with it as we were going along and kind of problem solving that way. I think IP addresses is potentially a way we could have done that. I know we've spoken a bit about that via email, but the difficulty with that at this point is we'd have to amend the ethics application, but then we'd have to have everyone reconsent, and I'm worried at that point we would lose people that are already in the study. And I know IP addresses aren't 100% accurate, but I do think that could at least help me work out if the same person was signing up multiple times. And I think we had some issues. I mean, if you're putting your postcode as Buckingham Palace, it implies that you're probably not based in the UK. So I think the IP addresses would help to have limited that as well. And then later on in my interviews, I asked them to clarify bits from their demographic survey. So that was something I implemented partway through, which I hadn't done for the first few interviews as well. So I think that really helped.
Great, thank you. And I have a question for Susannah here from Slido and from Ruth Kipping. What are your tips for recruiting elite interviewees and engaging them in your research?
Yeah, very challenging, potentially. There are lots of issues with, potential issues with recruiting elites. But I think that your connections and network are really important. I'm fortunate in the study that I'm doing that I have really good connections through my supervisors and through some of the colleagues as well in terms of being able to access those participants. But I think also it's a matter of not making the assumption that they won't be interested in the research, because again, I think this idea that all elites are very difficult to recruit, if you can manage to get access to them, which yes, I think is probably difficult, but if you've got those connections and the access, then I think that actually don't assume they won't be interested. They may be very interested, depending on how you present the purpose of the research and the relevance for them. Yeah.
That's great.
Sorry, I'm conscious of the time. I could go on, but...
Thank you very much. So can we stand again and thank all of our wonderful speakers? Okay, so moving on, as we all know, place is very important in public health, and indeed, School for Public Health Research has the HP2 programme, which is about healthy places and a healthy planet. And in our local ICB here in Bristol, we have 3 local authorities, essentially, Bristol City Council, South Gloucestershire and North Somerset. And we have representatives from all 3 councils here with us today. But I'm particularly delighted to introduce you to Matt Lenny, who is Director of Healthy and Sustainable Communities in North Somerset Council. And he's going to tell us a little bit about himself and how he arrived in public health, because like many of us, he's had quite a wiggly career, I think it's fair to say. And then he's going to tell us something of his work with the council. Matt is responsible for, amongst other things, regulatory services, so important things like licensing and trading standards, emergency planning, community safety, economy and placemaking, and climate and emergency planning. So he has a big portfolio of work, and we're looking forward to hearing what you've got to say, Matt. Thanks you.
Thank you. Well, hello everyone. Very nice to be here with you, and welcome to Bristol. One of the best places you can be to do public health. I can say that wholeheartedly, having been here for, well, 25 years pretty much for most of my career. So, as Rona was saying, I am Director of Healthy and Sustainable Communities. That also includes my role as Director of Public Health. I've taken on that wider brief of many and interesting and challenging responsibilities since the start of this year. And that's probably quite unique in local authorities, so quite a conscious decision in our council to make sure that we are putting health at the heart of policy, to think about health in terms of wider determinants of health and well-being, not just in terms of interactions in the health and social care system. So we're trying to be quite ambitious, and I'll explain a bit more about why we've taken that approach. That's both an officer and an elected politician-led decision. So very much in one step in trying to move to that approach. So this is my career path, not very straight. But I think it's good because it's, you know, as almost 30 years now in work, you do that reflective practice, don't you? And you do the bit of how did I get here? And recently we had a young staff forum event where they say, oh, you know, what was your plan? I'd love to say there was a plan. There's kind of instincts, but not necessarily a plan. And a lot of it is actually just about working with good people, you know, taking opportunities to learn and to be coached as you go along the way, and seeing opportunity and stepping into that space where you think you might have something to offer. And hopefully that's what I'm trying to do in the role I'm in now. But interestingly, my first degree was politics. Then I went to America and worked on a political campaign. I thought that was going to be my thing. And then I came back, and then I went to Dublin and trained in journalism. So I worked as a journalist for a while. And then after that, I moved into sort of journalism and then marketing and communications work. All in the public sector, so local authorities first, so Kent, Buckinghamshire, District Council in Northern Ireland, and then I moved back to England in 2000 and started working in the NHS. So I worked in the Department of Health and Social Care, then moved to Primary Care Trust down in Cornwall, the Isles of Scilly. That was a really good experience. Came back up here, local authority, public health, and then 6 months before the pandemic, I was made Director of Public Health. So timing is a thing in careers as well. So the most rapid acceleration in my learning that I could ever ask for, but I wouldn't want to repeat it. But I think it's just that thing about multidisciplinary public health is so important, that range of perspectives, that complementary skills, and creating spaces where you can talk to people about what's your view on that. We heard a lot about patient-public involvement, so one of my jobs was responsible for that at Primary Care Trust. Massive learning in terms of how communities look and feel. Massive learning about the ability to do less of this and do more of that. And making sure you're really thoughtful about how you approach that with communities, because there's nothing worse than being done to. Anyway, moving on from the slightly bizarre career journey, I've got 2 daughters who are graduating this year, so I keep telling them, don't worry, it'll all make sense in the end. So North Somerset, quite a nice place to live actually. I have lived there for the last 25 years, and there's lots of beautiful parts of North Somerset, and there are lots of great places to live, work and enjoy life. But we have a place of contrast in North Somerset. So that map is the index of multiple deprivation. So you can see a quite stark contrast between lots of green, slight different shades of, and then essentially a significant need in Weston-super-Mare. So if you take Weston-super-Mare Central, some of the indicators of health and well-being rank alongside the poorest outcomes, the poorest 5% of outcomes in the whole of the country. So you could stand that up next to Toxteth or Moss Side or inner city London, no problems at all. Not big population sizes, but significant need in those areas. And working with those communities is the fundamental part of my job, and trying to get services, trying to get organisations to think about this consistently in how they develop and deliver support is so important. Also, I suppose it's recognising that we have the coastal dynamic as well. So I've just put a short quote up there from Chris Whitty's report talking about the significant dynamics there are in coastal communities. And there's a brilliant Coastal Communities Collaborative Research project happening at the moment, which lots of you will know about. And that is just trying to tease out in communities, well, what makes the difference? How do you change those dynamics? How do you change horizons in communities that feel quite done to in lots of ways? And I think that's really important to keep that opportunity to learn as we go along. But perhaps in a slightly more visual way, this is a kind of slightly different way of saying the same thing. On the left-hand side is an excerpt from the Director of Public Health Annual Report. That's really pleased to launch that on No Smoking Day this year. Tobacco is still such a significant cause of harm in our communities, so I'm really keen to keep the focus on it. And we're doing a lot of innovative work in North Somerset and in our system to try and get more people to have the opportunity to get support. We've got lots of innovative work around swap-to-stop kits around vapes. We have peer support models being developed, as well as significant investment in help to stop smoking services. But if you look here, this is smoking at the time of delivery. So we have a number of wards in North Somerset which are less than 3%. And then we have one ward at the top, Weston-super-Mare South, almost 33%. Almost 1 in 3 women are smoking at the time of delivery. Think of the harm that causes to that individual, to the unborn baby, and in terms of family dynamics, everything that happens. So we have to laser in on those sorts of statistics and say that is the thing that we need to know, we must focus on, and we need to know how to go about doing that. And we're doing a lot of work now with treating tobacco dependency services in midwifery, but we're also doing a lot of work in our community to understand, in that particular community, to understand why is this not, connecting with you through health services, but also through social contacts as well. And there's an alternative version of the same truth. This is about free school meals, and you can see 3 times higher in Weston-super-Mare South than across the rest of North Somerset. You could pick a lot more indicators. You could talk about prevalence of mental health issues. It would be a similar statistic. You could talk about probably access to services or perceived access to services. That would be a similar statistic. So it's just underlining the fact that within our overall approach, it is about that proportionate universalism stuff, the Marmot principles of we have to have good things in place, but we really have to target where it matters most. But I like to tell stories of hope as well as stories of, oh dear, there's a big problem here. And this is a real example, and what I'm very proud of. One of my best jobs is that I'm one of the breastfeeding guardians in North Somerset. So myself from a public health side, and then the lead for Sorona, our community nursing provider, who lead the health visiting service. So we adopted the UNICEF Baby Friendly Initiative standards, rigorous audit of our processes, significant investment in consistent training and practice across everyone who was supporting mothers in North Somerset. We had lots of activity that got underneath the skin of why things weren't changing. And as well as those things, and very good investment in additional support services for those that were really struggling. But the gold dust in all of this was peer supporters. So if you look on the left-hand side, you can see the disparity between, that's the IMD deciles from red, most deprived, to least deprived. Look at that at the first time point, back in 2017-18. You've got from 24% up to almost 60% up there. Oh, sorry, almost 70%. So massive differences. You can see how that has equalised out across the population. But that's only because we had real intention, we had a systematic way of delivering that, evidence-based, so really important about how you guys contribute and develop that evidence base to then make that change. And the best bit is, it wasn't just about pulling the top ones down, it has been about raising everybody up, because you could gain it, couldn't you, I suppose? But a very conscious way of just making that part of how things work in North Somerset. And as I say, the peer supporters were the key bit. Wasn't a huge investment, but it was investing some money in people having the time to go around and support and to train. We also paid small amounts of money for people to be community volunteers and going out and making sure we had breastfeeding welcome signs on many of our venues in North Somerset, all about normalising, all about making that very much part of the way things are done in our community. So we did a lot of work with University of Swansea on that, and I'll reference that in a moment. There's a lovely video on YouTube to watch which tells the story about how change has happened, and yeah, very proud of everybody who's worked on that, because that's been a long-term aim and it continues to get better and better, and hopefully we will be BFI Gold accredited this summer for the 5th year in a row. So that's an example. I suppose it's also thinking about the school here and the work that you're doing. It's recognising, from my perspective, there's an absolute connection between what we say in North Somerset are our core priorities. So those 4 areas are the ambitions in our council plan. So talking about children and young people, talking about caring, health, safe communities, sustainable places, and the last one is just an enabler of all of that. Good value services, making sure it's good reach for our population, but it really chimes with the research themes that you're working on. So I suppose my point is, local authorities are great places to work with. We have so many different types of services, particularly in unitary authorities where we do everything, which is sometimes a challenge in itself, but we do everything, from training standards to planning to economic development to social care to bus routes to all those things that make the difference in how interventions work or don't work for communities. We have all that in our gift, I suppose, to some extent. Despite the financial challenges that local authorities are facing, we are very keen to try and address all of these ambitions and improve outcomes for local residents. But we will always take opportunities to embed research into the way we're doing that. And we will always try and take that learning that you can give us to make sure that we're most effective in the way we implement it. I think one of the big issues we have is about design is one part of it, but the implementation is so key, and having more understanding of how to implement what seems like a good thing to do makes a massive difference, and that's where research is so important, as well as understanding how to do it right in the first place. So just kind of, saying that there's a good chime there. How do we make actions work? Well, this is my kind of current, scratch head moment. We're in another process of change around the NHS, as you all know. So within our integrated care system, moving from Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire to now, add on number 7 there, come in number 7, you're Gloucestershire, would you like to come and join our family? And at the same time, over here, we have a sort of wider government jigsaw that's working. So we've just had the West of England Combined Authority elections. Here we are, North Somerset, the slightly greyed out bit there, or less grey actually, that doesn't sound right, does it? But we're sat on the doorstep, knocking at the door saying, please can we come in? And it's a weird dynamic when actually what you want to be thinking about is how, as a system, we understand and respond to health needs and build health and well-being into our communities, but often we're working in slightly contrary systems. While this one's changing, it's harder to land decision-making, harder to land resource allocation, harder to land the things that you want to do in partnership. And while this is changing as well, we're sort of slightly in, slightly out, can access some funds, can't access other funds. So your ability to be consistent in the way you practice some of those interventions is frustrating. But, that such is the thing of life. It's all about then, how do you get alongside? And I suppose one of the key things is we can concentrate a lot on this, drawings on a map, or structure charts is my other favourite, watching those change in organisations. But it's not about that. It's about relationships and it's about trust. It's about how do you build that kind of understanding about these are our shared outcomes, this is the thing that matters, and let's work together to do that, regardless of the jigsaw changing around you. So when I go back to those slides about Weston-super-Mare and some of the outcomes, that's not changing because of that. It's keeping your eye on the prize of, all the North Star is, we still have to tackle inequalities in Weston-super-Mare. And I'll work with anybody to do that. I don't need to see my name on a map to make that happen. So, but it's interesting to try and navigate change in that. And I suppose that might be some of your barriers in terms of, well, who can open doors and when can people make decisions? So apologies if you get frustrated by some of that. But do always knock on the door of, directors of public health and their teams. Anything we can do to open those doors and ease those conversations, we will try to do for you. I suppose that's an offer, sometimes with the translator of some slightly strange policy at times. And if that helps, very happy to offer it. So this is so live, this example. So as I finish and get off the lectern here, I've got to hot-foot it to Weston-super-Mare for our Health and Wellbeing Board this afternoon, which is great. Very positive kind of partnership working, and this is what we're talking about today. So we talk about sustainable communities. Here's the North Somerset local plan over here. Huge impact on North Somerset. We've got about 100,000 homes in North Somerset at the moment. That's going to grow by another 24,000 over the lifetime of the local plan. Think about that in terms of long-term impacts on communities, what we could build in terms of hardening inequalities potentially, if we don't do that in a thoughtful way, but what we could build in terms of health gain if we do it in a thoughtful way and try and max out on any opportunities we have. So this afternoon, the Health and Wellbeing Board will be going through, and here's a lovely guidance document which came out recently, and this is about how to build health into your local plan. So big up to colleagues in both Bristol Uni and University of West of England who worked on this document with local authorities and the Town and Country Planning Association. This is really good stuff because this is applied research, I suppose. This is saying, these are the things you need to pay attention to. It's got really clear examples and it's even got case studies. And they're the things, I suppose, that really help us translate the ambition into practice. And our planners love this as well. So, what's not to like? If you've got public health and planning on the same page, great. And now we're trying to take our elected members and our other stakeholders in North Somerset with us on this journey. And hopefully at the end of today, I'll have a whole list of people who are going to say, well, I can help you with that one, and I can help you with that one, I can help you with that one. We just create the framework within which people can operate and deliver those outcomes. So it's going to happen, national policy. It's all about how it happens and how do we manage that implementation well using our partnerships, the best evidence available to us, and ultimately those relationships to work our way through this, which is going to be quite a long-term process. So that's a bit of an example. And the other thing I just want to acknowledge is, I mentioned it, come and talk to us, but we have lots of ways in which we work with you guys. There was some in the room here who we are actively working with in different ways. We do have a research governance group within the local authority. So we do meet regularly across our departments. We try and think about where are the opportunities to max out. We've got lots of skilled practitioners in public health, social care, trying to build more of those in the placemaking services in terms of how they're connected to. We've got loads of roles as well. Some of these are kind of very formal, if you like, programs, and we do informal stuff as well. So recently, one of our service leaders in our public health team, she's an OT by background. And she's brought a lot of people in from her world to come and spend time with us and work on projects and starting to build that multidisciplinary understanding of, where are the opportunities here to synchronise our efforts. But we have public health registrars on their training programme. We have GP scholars. We have population research fellows. We're just about to welcome our local authority research practitioner, who's one of 3 across our system, Bristol and North and South Gloucestershire as well. We use national graduate and public health apprentices in our system to try and broaden that learning. Georgie MacArthur is an honorary consultant, senior lecturer. I'm a visiting professor at UE. There's all these connections. I suppose it's just use us, really. And if people are interested in spending some time in our world, please just knock on the door. So it could be through one of those routes where you see that as part of your development, or it could be just, could we come and see you? Come and join one of our directorate leadership meetings or whatever and get a flavour for some of the things we're working on as a team. That sort of stuff can be really helpful. And in the same way, if you think, could you come and join us? Because we don't just sit in an ivory tower. If you'd like us to come out and talk to you about or to listen about opportunities, then we'd be really happy to do that too. But I think it's all about the capacity and capability, and there's more than one way to do that. So it's keeping the communication lines open and looking for those opportunities as they come up along the way, I think. Some name checks. 4 people who are involved in work at the moment. So Cheryl and Laura, and then Georgie and Becky working around this really helpful piece of evaluation that's coming in around why wait. So this is a systems approach to supporting people to achieve and maintain a healthier weight. Much more compassionate approach to that, less kind of judgmental, less harsh in terms of it's about your weight status. No, it's about what's going on for you. How do we support you in that space? And so it's those sorts of collaborations, and particularly at system level, if we can apply that learning over a wider footprint and improve practice and equity of provision, that's really important as well, because that's one of the things we do suffer from, the elements of postcode lottery. And that's because local authorities are different, that's because health providers are different, that's because integrated care boards are different, so we just need to keep an eye on that and keep challenging us when you see those gaps in terms of outcomes driven by lack of health equity. Also, just recognition around work around our adults directorate, working on the Connected project. We're working around mental health, social media and wellbeing, and weight-related bullying. And that's the reference I said to Swansea, which was all the work around baby-friendly and breastfeeding outcomes. So there's lots in there. We talk about research regularly. We're up for doing more. And we want to try and enable you to get to the right people if you have interesting studies. So talk to us about that and we'll work our way through it. So I'm just going to loop round, and then I think there's a bit of an opportunity for you to quiz me. I'll do my best. From my perspective, the healthy and sustainable communities approach, back to that multidisciplinary way. We all have lots of things to bring to the table. It's about creating a respectful environment where everybody can do that and we can learn from each other. The systems are often complex, that's kind of a given, but it doesn't mean you can't navigate your way through them, and we can be honest about the things that we can control, the things that we can't control, and the wisdom to know the difference, as the saying goes, so we can do our best in the circumstances, and we should, and not let that defeat us. But there's lots of agendas where things align. That shared outcome space, I think a lot in ecosystems and Venn diagrams when I'm doing my job. So what's going on around this? And where's the shared point of interest? Where's your motivation for having this conversation? And I think there's a lot where research can drive that, because people say, yeah, we would like to know what's really going on there too. Okay, well, perhaps we can link with a team who can give us some of those answers, and then we can implement that change. So think in that way. I think it's this thing about what matters to people in their daily lives. Interestingly, where I've come from this morning is that there's an event at Bristol's football ground, well, and rugby ground actually. It's a multi-sport venue. And there's a company called Epic who work in informatics, data informatics, and they're about to build their European headquarters in North Somerset, but just sort of the other side of North Somerset near Long Ashton. Huge international company, massive data sets they were talking about. Really interesting stuff, but I had a brief conversation with them afterwards, and it's all about, great, but where's the human in that? Where's the day-to-day housing issue, or the lack of childcare, or where's the social environment that means I'm not confident in walking out of my front door? We can do lots of clinical measurements, and that's important to optimise people's clinical care, but we need to go way back upstream. We need to think about what's going on for those people, and how do you get the data and the understanding about what matters to people, and where to start a conversation, rather than use your AI bot to tell you what time to take your medicine. That helps, but it doesn't solve the problem. So it's constantly challenging on behalf of what it feels like for a person on the end of that service or that lack of service. And I think it's about growing appreciation of what research and evidence does in that space to teach us the things that we need to just stop rushing to solutions, take a moment and think about what's going on. And then finally, we just have to focus on what matters to, I always say individuals, families and communities. Because no one person exists as an island, generally. Some people do, and that's an issue in itself. But what is the day-to-day environment in which you exist, and how do we create supportive structures around you? And by doing that, you do solve the big problems. So local authority, next year, we're looking at a budget deficit of £10 to £12 million. Not great, because that's going to impact on service delivery, that will impact on some outcomes for the population. But it just drives you further to how do we do the prevention to stop those problems building into complex social care need, adults with significant frailty, all of those things. They're driven by things that we know about. So we have to go back to basic principles of what matters to you, what matters to your family, what matters to your community. And if we start to listen and address some of those things, we might get to a better long-term solution. Okay, a few thoughts from me. I hope that was helpful. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was wonderful. You talked about so many things that are highly relevant to what we do in the school, and as our sort of core, we're there to provide evidence for research evidence for public health practice, and it was so wonderful to hear from you how valuable that is to you. So, if we can detain you a little bit longer before you have to go off to your health and wellbeing board and ask you some questions. So, questions from the floor? Yes, a couple at the back.
Thanks so much, Matt. That was really interesting to hear. In addition to research, one of the hats that I wear involves working with a peer support team in the Devon NHS. So it was great to hear that you had such success involving in peer support workers in the community, and that they had such a significant impact on outcomes for breastfeeding. So I would just love for you to talk a little bit more about your experience of setting that up and what you felt was successful.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I suppose in terms of setting it up, what we did have was a natural evolution of peer support informal approaches in the north of North Somerset. So if you can think of Portishead, Clevedon, Long Ashton, Nailsea, that sort of area. And that was largely self-organised and self-supporting with a little bit of input from health visitors, midwives and children's centres. But it wasn't taking off in the south of North Somerset at all. So it was looking at, well, what were the things that worked there, the concept, but it started from a conversation with communities about what are the things that are not working for you. Some of that was about services, so we had to take those learnings and apply those, and we used the BFI framework to really hone in on how to do that properly. But most of it was about, I need to see people, I want to talk to people like me. No great surprise there, is there? If we've got a problem, who do we go to? We go to a friend who understands us, a sympathetic ear. We don't generally start with somebody who looks quite different to me and I don't know well. So we incentivised people who came through those conversations and in the wider community who connected to friends to say, would you be up for this? And we ran sessions to test that out. We didn't like say, right, that's it, you signed up and off you go. It was a sort of soft, supportive approach. We've got some brilliant people in our public health team, brilliant people in our health visiting team, and they were really up for it. So they worked with them to say, what would be the support structure around you? How would that work? And what are the tools you need to be able to do that? So one of the key things was they wanted their own Facebook group for the groups that they were supporting. And that was it's 3 a.m, I can't do this any longer. Can anyone help me? Hey, guess what? Yeah, I'm up feeding. What's going on? Let's see if I can help you. We had lots of those incidents. So then those stories start to go round and it's like people are around all the time. Everybody wants to help. And we were just facilitating in terms of giving the right resources to let that happen. But it was based on the learning and the listening at the start, rather than coming with a preconception of it looks like this, especially if it looked like that in the north. Well, it looks different in and around Weston-super-Mare, and that's fine. We will design it that way round. So I don't know if that helps, but that was the broad approach.
Great, thank you. I think we've got another question from the floor.
Hi, Matt. I'm Peter. I'm a public partner with the school. I found that really helpful and insightful, and I particularly learnt about Weston-super-Mare, which I'll look at further. But can I, in terms of public involvement, all this research is about people, yes? How is public involvement embedded in the infrastructure at North Somerset, and how do you ensure that it's there, it helps shape the work and also keeps it involved throughout the project?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think it's varied ultimately. What we are trying to do is to develop, so we have a community strategy, and one of those strands within the community strategy is around community conversations. We've developed more support and more toolkits and approaches for people working within services to think more carefully about who's on the receiving end of this service or this change. What mechanisms can you use to engage with those individuals more effectively? And also, we've got some really good aspects of good practice, probably particularly in our social care, where we've got genuine examples of not even just co-design, but co-production in how things have been transformed. We've had a real difficult journey with special educational needs in North Somerset, but by working with a parent carer forum particularly, we've started to see some improvements. We've started to see change in practice. We've started to see changes in systems that people interact with. So I think we've got some good examples. I think some of our more general public-facing services, things like buses, waste, probably even planning now, and we're looking at that at the moment. How do we improve that experience so people feel like they're getting good outcomes for them, their family, their community? So it's not perfect, but there are some good examples, and we do at least have a better framework now. But being honest with you, one of the big challenges in local authority is resources. So the amount of people who are there to be able to run those programmes, to be able to provide the right support and skills to individuals is fairly limited. But we're always happy to work with people like yourself to be able to bring in a broader perspective. We do have a citizen panel in North Somerset, which we use quite a lot, and we've just recruited our chief executive, actually, a new chief exec, and they were involved in that process, and I chaired that discussion, which was really good. It gave an honesty to some of the issues in an interview process for someone who was going to lead the organisation. So those are examples, but we're happy to share around links to other things if that's helpful.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Great. We've got some questions on Slido for you, Matt. You mentioned high rates of prenatal smoking. Where does addressing prenatal alcohol sit in your priorities, and how does it vary in your communities?
Yeah, it's a more difficult one, definitely. One, because there's a public health issue, it's more nuanced, isn't it? I think everybody can accept the fact that tobacco is a dangerous thing. Alcohol, well, what's your relationship with alcohol? What's your expectations? What's the norms? All of that. It's also being honest about it. Get back to resources. What we do have for tobacco is significant investment in resources around the smoke-free generation work at national level. And that's in stop smoking services, that's in enforcement. It's multifaceted, which really helps us do the right things. Whereas alcohol, if I'm being honest, is a bit of a forgotten issue in the public health policy world, something that I personally think is wrong. We have no alcohol strategy in this country, or do we? Has anyone found one? Because I haven't. And it's massive harm. And when we look at the drivers of those inequalities, when we talk about cardiovascular disease, we talk about cancer as the outcomes of some of those inequalities, alcohol plays a huge part in that. We have more focused around specific other substance use issues where there's more national money, but alcohol is very much on the periphery. We do what we can in the work that we do. So, for example, we've got a Healthy Settings programme in North Somerset, so we work in early year settings, in schools and in workplaces. Our workplaces programme has expanded recently, so we've gone from 0 to almost 30,000 employees covered by that programme in the last 18 months. Another chance to reach into that population, but I think in terms of an intervention for prenatal alcohol, there is nothing there. There's nothing commissioned to do that, and there's no specific funding. That's not right, but I'm just being honest about the situation. And I do think alcohol is a if the long-term plan in the NHS is genuine about change in terms of health, it needs to think about the big drivers of what causes poor health in our population. So tobacco is one, but alcohol's another, mental health's another, and healthy weight is another. So it should cover that, not just moving the deck chairs around in an organisational map all over again. It needs to be outcomes-led.
Well, we did have an alcohol theme in the school, Matt, early on, so you're preaching to the converted here to some extent, which is great. I just want to clear up a concern from someone who is at the back of the room about whether your graphs on breastfeeding were showing the least deprived groups getting worse. No, quite the opposite. They were, after intervention, the differences were diminished betwing different groups.
Halved. Between those two time periods, the gap in outcomes was about halved, from 42% to, I think it's something like 21.3 or something like that. But yeah, so we've halved the gap in outcomes.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to see the scale, I think, in the back of the room. I think that's where the question was coming from, but important to clear that up. Okay, so another question for you. How does the council use evidence from other councils, and what criteria do you use when reviewing or appraising that evidence? So I guess the sharing good practice question.
Yeah, good point. I think that happens more certainly in the Southwest, there are a lot of networks that exist across the local authority teams. So there'll be one for tobacco, there'll be one for early years, there'll be one for healthy weight, all of those sorts of things. And that tends to be the platform at which people do the sharing and learning, where the good practice gets brought in and then people think about how to apply that across all of our systems. That's probably the main collaboration. Certainly as Directors of Public Health, we try and support each other. We do some of that. Here's something useful that's happened in our patch recently, been well evaluated. This is how we're implementing it, sharing it around for information. So there's elements of that all the time, but probably it's the people leading, whether that's at consultant public health level or at kind of public health manager level. There's lots of dialogue all the time, lots of sharing tools and understanding. So if you're working with a local authority team, always ask them about, and how would you share this learning? How can you help us socialise this in, for example, the regional Healthy Weight Conference? If it's one of those, it should be one of the good practice examples that's demonstrated and people can ask questions and then go ahead to implementation. So it's more informal networks, but they are very effective. So I would advocate using those.
Okay, any more questions from the floor? Yes.
Thank you. That was a really interesting presentation. In terms of the peer support for breastfeeding, did you find any wider benefits for other maternal and infant health outcomes? And did you measure them at all, thinking about maternal mental health or infant outcomes?
Yes, definitely. Those wider outcomes were in there, and people's engagement with services also went up, the confidence to engage with services. I'll have to defer to my colleagues to try and work out, because I don't know how those have been measured, but I know there's elements of holistic support that were offered around. So it wasn't just, you're here for a single outcome, thanks very much, goodbye. It was very much about, well, what's going on for you? And so that is part of the study. So some of the research from Swansea has picked up on some of those things. It's also shown that I think we've got probably the most comprehensive database at breastfeeding status at age 1 and at 2 as well for children. So our rates are very high in North Somerset at year 1, which shows there's a core kind of understanding and support and social kind of dynamic that's happening there. And I think that's been driven by the programme, and that adds into those other outcomes. But we can always put you in touch with colleagues who'll have more detail. Very happy to.
And I think we've got a couple of questions on this side of the room, Matt.
Matt Egan, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. I'm interested in health and place, and environmental health do a huge amount on the health and place side. So I wondered, do public health and environmental health work a lot together? Are they kind of working as one, or are they working more separately? Are there barriers to their working? What's the relationship like between the two sides of health in the local authority?
Yeah, well, I'm pleased to say in my local authority, it's we sit in the same area, because environmental health is one of the areas that I'm responsible for. So we took an integrated approach back in 2019 when it became public health and regulatory services. I think they do an amazing job at environmental health in all of its aspects. They are fearless. They are, really kind of strong in their principles about how they do things, and they are such strong advocates for the community. So, for example, we're doing a piece of work at the moment around hoarding. So presents as environmental health risk in terms of, and a lot of potential disrupt in the community about, look at the front garden, look at the behaviour. But of course, it's fundamentally a mental health issue. So what we're trying to do is do a collaborative approach around how do we get more preventative, proactive support in for those individuals rather than just hammer them for the rubbish in their garden, which is just a symptom of, you know, the struggles that they have. We've done a lot around trauma-informed care as well, and providing that support to train our practitioners, frontline practitioners, which they're finding quite empowering in terms of how they can look at a situation slightly differently whilst trying to do their job, which is ultimately regulate in some way. But yeah, I think they're great colleagues to work with. They teach us a lot in public health, and hopefully we help them in terms of their opportunities to do things in a holistic way as well.
Great. And I think there's another question at the back. Oh, yes, Helen.
Hi, thank you very much. Helen Hoyle from the University of Sheffield. I work in the area of natural environments and human well-being, and it's very interesting that you highlight coastal environments for being, you know, the highly deprived areas, which have, in terms of a lot of research, shown to be associated with very positive well-being and preferences in other research. The question, though, is, do you collaborate with other coastal environments, coastal local authorities, such as, for example, Blackpool, to look at the sort of roots of the issues and address those? Just wondering if you have that sort of collaboration. Thanks.
Yeah, so the coastal communities research happening at the moment is Weston-super-Mare, Blackpool, and it's Hastings as well. So some of that sharing of understanding is happening. In terms of some of the natural environment stuff, so one element which we've led under the Health and Wellbeing Board, we've developed a children and young people, it's called essentially a green social prescribing fund, and it's match funding, 50,000 from our Health and Wellbeing Board, 50,000 from Sirona, our community health provider, and 50,000 from the ICB to try and create a more sustainable infrastructure for supporting young people with low to moderate mental health needs out into natural environments and changing some of the dynamic for them. And some of that's using our coast as well. It's really interesting at coastal communities. I used to work in Cornwall as well, and the children who live a short walk from the beach who don't use it because it's for tourists or it's for day trippers, we have the same in Weston, opening up that environment and saying, no, this is your community, this is your space, can be quite transformative for people, as well as taking them up in the Mendips or wherever else it might be. So it's helping to use that as a therapeutic approach and using some of the kind of natural resources that we do have and enabling more people to enjoy them. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Another question on the national environment. How do you work in a national environment with some talk of reducing and constraining finances on waste in councils?
Yeah. Well, when you work in a local authority, you work in a political environment all the time. So we are officers, members make decisions, ultimately elected members are councillors. So you know that sometimes that the starting point or even the policy is something that you kind of have to just keep working with. That's back to that trust and relationships bit. It's harder at the national level, to be honest. And I think it's hard for local government to have a strong voice. Probably particularly at the moment, we've got some quite strong policy direction coming from national government, and probably in a fairly fast, we're doing it way rather than let's sit in a room together and work it out. That's the reality we're in. And I suppose, can you influence at that point? Well, if it's gone, it's gone, but implementation is key. So it's all about trying to show, again, what's the outcome you're trying to get. And we need to try and make the case for not just reacting to short-term financial pressures and create more problems further down the road. And that's a big issue in local government at the moment. Social care is essentially the thing that is breaking the financial model in local authorities. But social care is a symptom of other things. And we are not doing enough. A lot of the things that were stripped out over the last 15 years, we're just seeing a natural progression of that. So what can we do? Well, we advocate, we use our Association of Directors of Public Health, we use the Faculty of Public Health, we use every mechanism we can to try and make the case, but influencing national policy is hard at times. And sometimes you just have to wait for an opportune moment to make it happen. But it can sometimes change in a moment. When I think about the smoke-free generation legislation, when Rishi Sunak announced that. That was a bit of a, whoa, where did that come from? But that would have been long, consistent messaging from Chief Medical Officer and other leaders in our system saying, if there's one thing you could do well, go and do this. And then hopefully we might move on to, for example, alcohol next, or possibly healthy weight. Something about systematic government policy. When you look at the review around obesity and what would make the difference, it's all about national policy, isn't it? Let's be honest. We can do things at local level, but if you have a food environment that mitigates any chance of anyone or lots of people having a sustainable, healthy diet, then that, you know, you're fighting a really hard battle there. So I'm sorry, that probably didn't answer the question in a particularly aspirational way, but I think for me it's all about where you go to the next moment of influence and the next moment of influence. Even if you lose that battle, you try and regroup and go again.
Great. Well, with apologies to those of you who've posted a few other questions that I'm sorry we've run out of time for them. But thank you so much, Matt, for your fascinating presentation and for answering so many questions. You've really got us off to a great start this morning, I think, in surfacing lots of really important themes for us. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.